I'm assuming your first book, Twin Engine, has something to do with your passion for PA-23 Pipers.
Well, maybe not so much pipers, but I do like pipers. I like boy, some of my I think I don't know if you've heard some of my background as far as aviation, but my dad built an airplane
Yeah.
in our garage, and so I grew up um, in aviation since I can remember, and some of my favorite planes, is the Pitt Special.
Oh yeah.
My dad built a Cougar, a Nesmith Cougar, which was, uh, quite different. But it's and a P-38 is what, P-51s. I just love aviation. And so the concept for my first book is my dad built the airplane, and he and my younger brother, were flying over Lake Michigan, and they didn't quite make it. And they found my brother about a week later, but they've never found the plane or my dad, and that was in 1974. So I had the idea for this book that, like, since he's never been found, what if um, the main character got an email that a cryptic email that said something only his dad would say to him. And since
Mhm.
his father had never been found, it kind of went from there of like, is he or isn't he? Still alive, that sort of thing. So he took the main character took his younger daughter, who was the same age as my brother, and traveled the same course back from the West Coast to the East Coast, and kind of unraveled a mystery. And that was the first book.
And so, how did you make the transition from that to a story about drug cartels and attempted assassination of the president in Oregon?
Well, that came about because I think my love of and my short attention span of the love of Elmore Leonard, and um, when I picked up Lee Child's book. I met Lee Child at Crime Fest years ago,
Mhm.
and the thing with authors, they're just so open and welcoming, and we were checking into the hotel, and he struck up the conversation first. And I had never read his books up until that time. And this was the time that Tom Cruise was in his movie.
Mhm.
And it's like, I picked one up, and I read every single one of them. And I just said, this looks like fun. I want to write a book this fast that feels like a movie, and high action, fast paced. And that's that's what got me started on this.
I I love it. And let me give you my favorite compliment on your take on the genre. I met Lee years ago, and I don't know how many conversations with him over the years.
Uh-huh.
Um, one of my passions is to take that genre and write stories about what common people faced with unusual situations might do in that environment. I am a strong, I, let's just say that I have become weary of superheroes. And
Oh yeah.
one of the things I absolutely love about your book is you've got some people that have skills and
Mhm.
training, um, but they aren't superheroes. And I want, for anybody who has not read Gene's book, Another Try, that's uh, the way he folds the skill sets into just a passion for trying to solve the problem, but not having any real insight on how to do it. I thought was really well crafted.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, no, I am tired of superheroes as well, even though as a kid, I had every Superman, and, but it's like, I don't know, it's just not my thing anymore. But the heroes that I look for now are just, normal people, the
Mhm.
average people. Um, it's one of those things where I just enjoy meeting people. and I'm interested in what they do. It doesn't matter, what job they have or who they are. I just take an interest in it, and sometimes that will creep into the books now. So,
And again, on specifically on this book, and I suppose this is kind of maybe a crazy question, but where did you come up with the names of your villains? I have never read a book where my villains are named Howdy and Duty and Trucker Cap.
oh, yeah. Um, well, okay, so let me ask you this before I answer that question.
Yeah.
When you start writing your book, Rodger, do your characters start talking to you? Do you I mean, you create um these people, but it for me, I started writing, and these guys developed, they were just talking to me, and some of the things they said in the book I had never said in my life or ever thought about it. So do you have that experience as well?
When I do a book, I start with a one-page outline of the book, and that is the plot of the book. This is the crisis that I'm working on, or the problem. Here is the solution at the end, and here are the steps, 5 or 6 steps necessary to get from A to B. And then I normally pick no more than 3 people, protagonists, no more than 3 antagonists, and I do a profile of those 6 people.
Yeah.
And once I get those people into the book, same thing happens with me. Once they start talking to each other and
Yeah.
about each other, the other characters seem to fall into place.
Yeah.
And the dialogue falls into place. And the most significant amount of rework that I do in a book often comes in the first 100 pages of the book, where I will get into the book and I will have a dialogue among characters that just doesn't seem natural. So I'll go back and look at it, and I will have plugged a character in that had popped into my mind, or was a solution to a problem, but that character really doesn't fit in this book. So I've stripped the character completely out, reworked that. And again, like you, it just comes from a lifetime of listening.
Right, right. Yeah. No, that's probably it. Listening. And well, I think, with my characters, as far as the name goes, um, I, I don't know where the name Garrus came from, but I put it in a few books, or some things I just like the name. So,
Mhm.
and Kelly, that was my mom's maiden name. So that was a nod
Mhm.
to, and Traverse City, that's a nod to the family. There's no Traverse City, but it's based on another city in Oregon, Eastern Oregon.
Mhm.
But there is Armin was another director, a Bosnian guy I knew in The Hague. He doesn't look anything like described in the book, but there is a sense of Armin as in the book. But yeah, some of the characters, they just sort of like, okay, who's this guy? And it just sort of, and I don't know about you, but uh, I spent a lot of time coming up with the names, I think. Do you do that as well? Like, because it has to fit the character, the name has to fit where the character is going. And if it doesn't,
Um,
I'll spend a lot of time thinking about character names.
I don't know that I spend a lot of time with it. Almost in the other 2 series that I write, there's a tremendous amount of international in it. And I do a huge amount of research on names on that. I've got literally files of Chinese names and the symbols and what they mean, and Iranian names and Russian names, and names from Mexico and Latin America that have fit into books. And I literally have a binder of all of those things now that I can draw on. But for the domestic stuff, no, I don't think so. I mean, it could come very well. I get up. The first thing I do every morning is I watch 3 newscasts. I watch a very conservative newscast on my iPad, a very liberal newscast, and then try to find something in the middle, which is really hard to do.
Yeah.
And I spend an hour every day just looking at the world. And I have a notepad sitting next to my bed, and I'll sit on top of the bed and do that. And if a name comes along that I just love, I'll jot it down,
Yeah.
and somehow it'll find its way into a book.
Yeah. No, I think some of the names give it add to the personality.
Well, I'm still curious, where did Howdy and Doody come from?
I'm a kid from, the 50s and 60s, and just the image of, I can't remember, the puppeteer,
Yes.
remember yeah. So that kind of came from there. And when I thought about the redheads, I can
Yeah.
just picture in my mind, Howdy and Doody. So it was
I,
kind of a
I,
nod to my
I
childhood.
absolutely, I absolutely love it because it is anybody who, anybody's old enough to know who Howdy Doody was, okay, can get a really quick visual.
Yeah.
Um, and that's all you had to say. You didn't have to describe them. The visual was there.
Right, right. No,
Mhm.
I wrote the book. I didn't know if it was going to go anywhere. I didn't know if, so I kind of wrote it uh, to do it, but also I wanted to entertain myself. So there's a lot of things I put in there just to please myself. And I figure if I get a kick out of this, maybe someone else will. And Howdy and Doody and was one of them. The Beluga was another one.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of inside things that just kind of gave me a chuckle, and I went with it. And hopefully it didn't, putter out too soon. But
It didn't.